Good evening, Mark here from Excel, and in the unusual position of actually being at Excel inside the warehouse for an evening without having to be at home or socially distance, all of which is rather good. And apologies for the attire, I have run in this evening, but the reason for running in is to do a quick top-up video tasting for this wine, being as it is the Stark-Condé Field Blend White 2020. Now, top-up tasting, because last week, the 2019 vintage of this wine was made JancysRobinson.com's Wine of the Week after a glowing write-up from their correspondent Tamlin Curran, and it sold out very, very fast. I mean, I think we had many cases of it, and it all vanished in about 3 hours. However, fortunately, the 2020 vintage was arriving. This video tasting is to see how this compares. Is it as good as the 2019? And it's a really fascinating question, actually, because obviously it is a year younger. Here is a glass of it here. I'm just sort of ruminating on it at this point in time. One thing I would generally say about this wine is it doesn't want to be served too cold. It's got two quite big body grapes in it, being the Viognier and the Roussanne. Neither of those grapes being served too cold. It just sort of thins out the texture. The whole point of putting those grapes into this wine is to create some thickness and viscosity to it. Actually, cool them down too much and you lose quite a bit of that. So I've actually let this warm up for a good 10 or 15 minutes coming out of the fridge. Warm up's a bit strong, but it needs a little more not being super icy cold. And it's interesting because it's only 5 or 6 days since I tried this. There are differences. The similarities are considerable. I think I mentioned on the tasting for the 19 that there are 2 or 3 things that hit you. The nose is extremely aromatic, extremely big on this wine. I think it was slightly bigger on the 19. And it has 2 or 3 things in that nose. There's a real florality, a whole raft of different really fragrant floral aromas to it. They were very present in the 19, marginally less in the 20, I would say. And the fruit that hit you was very much a sort of tropical sensation. That, I would say, is not at all diminished in the 2020. What's different about this wine in composition terms? Well, obviously it's a year younger, so that has a slight effect. But in composition terms, they've increased the Roussanne component from about 30-ish% to 50-ish%. And the other 3 grapes, Verdelho, Viognier, Chenin Blanc, have all come down correspondingly. And that, I think, definitely shows in the wine, in that Roussanne, in my book, is not hugely aromatic, certainly not compared with the other grapes that have been knocked down in this, particularly the Viognier and particularly the Verdelho. And so that definitely shows on the nose. It's definitely just a little bit less pronounced, which is not to make it as attractive. I think where its attractiveness really shows, it's when it's tasted, and that Roussanne has definitely thickened it up, given it a little more honey to it. It lacks a little bit, and I do mean a little bit of the complexity that the 19 had. There was this kind of really strong, I don't know how to put it, I think I described it as a sort of custard flavour, creamy flavour that the 19 had. That is definitely here in the 20. It is less pronounced, but still very much present. It still has that great texture, the great fruitiness. It has great acidity to it. It's still a cracking wine all round. Yeah, I think if I could take the 19, I would take the 19 over this, but I think in a few months' time, this is going to be doing exactly the same thing. It's a really stunning wine, and one that, yeah, I think even a vintage on absolutely warrants the billing it got as a Jancis Wine of the Week. And yeah, I would thoroughly endorse the new vintage. Not because we don't particularly want to sell it. If we didn't think it was as good, we wouldn't make these videos. We wouldn't tell you that. We'd go over something else. But yeah, this remains a great wine and much recommended.